All right. I'm going to give us just a second to get everyone in, all the attendees. Hi, everyone who's tuning in. Hi, Kathy. I see that you're here from Minneapolis. Hola. All right. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Amaya, and together with my business partner, Anne-Marie Hoftailing, I run a company called Story Imprinting, and we teach companies the art and science of storytelling and how to leverage storytelling across all verticals of their business. And I'm joined here today by two incredible women who I've had the pleasure to know professionally and personally for quite some time. And I'd love to introduce you both to them, and we're just going to dive right into the deep end of the pool with this topic. I will say, you know, when we decide, we've been doing these chats, kind of these Friday weekly chats since quarantine started, in recognition of the fact that, you know, there's a lot of content that's being generated out there, but a lot of it feels, you know, it's either like a webinar where people are just talking to you and you're sort of passively receiving information. But we wanted to talk about like some of these big issues that are coming up in business that women are confronting, that people of color are confronting, that we all are confronting in this new norm that we're sort of finding ourselves in with COVID. And the response to these Friday chats has been really awesome, like beyond frankly, like my wildest dreams. People are engaged. We appreciate you being here. We know that it is a Friday before a holiday, although what is time anymore? Am I right about that? Like, I don't even know what day it is. So we appreciate you being here and taking the time. If you were here, I want you to feel really comfortable and confident in asking questions. So you can use the chat feature or you can use the Q&A. If you want to ask an anonymous question, you can do that in the chat just by sending it to panelists. And if you don't want me to say like, oh, you know, Kathy has a question, just say, I would like for this to be kept anonymous. This should be a forum where we can really talk about this issue of imposter syndrome because I see it, I have seen it in my coaching clients and in the work that we do for companies, as has Anne-Marie, my partner, for many years. And it touches all of us, like regardless of whether we are starting out in our career, whether we have been in our industry for 30 years and risen, you know, and collected all of the professional accolades that would seem to, you know, legitimize us. Like people still suffer from this. And in my experience, women suffer mightily from it. With all of that said, please dive in, ask questions, give feedback. We love it. I will be monitoring that. So I'm going to introduce you to my amazing panelists. My first panelist is Ginger Hitzke. And in little over a decade, Ginger went from being a secretary to being a CEO, which is incredible. She is a first-generation real estate developer, and she builds new apartment complexes. She owns 7 complexes, totaling more than 450 homes, and she has an awesome website. We talked about this, Ginger, when you were here doing the branding chat a couple of weeks ago. Please, everybody, just Google Ginger Hitzke. Her name is down there. You will see her website. It's so awesome. I hope it like actually provokes some conversation today. And Ginger is one of those people that stands up 1000% for what she believes in, for what she believes to be right. And I respect the hell out of that and of you. And I appreciate your time today, Ginger.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Sarah Bacerra is a certified high performance coach, and she's also a learning experience designer and inclusion strategist. So she, you may also recognize Sarah from the Women's March. She was kind of the face of the Women's March this last year, right? Because you were emceeing it and running it.
It was, yeah.
Here in San Diego, which is amazing. And as a coach, she helps her clients use clarity, influence, and courage to achieve a fully charged and purpose-driven life. And she also, much like Ginger, is not afraid to say what she thinks and to say it with conviction and to take part in a conversation like the one we're having today, which, to be totally honest, requires a level of authenticity and vulnerability. I mean, we have to give voice to things like imposter syndrome to really start cracking the code of why that happens and to get over it, right? And so I appreciate both of you being here. To kick it off, why don't you each tell me a little bit about yourselves, sort of like who you are, what you do, what the path has been like to get there. Ginger, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I was gonna say Sarah should go. So
Sarah should go first. Sarah,
here,
go first.
who are like so excited to see her here.
Oh yeah, Fans.
You do, you have fans in the chat. I love it.
I feel so loved. Yeah, I can go first. Ooh, how do I even answer that question? What a loaded question to start.
I know.
Who are you?
It's broad. Pick a point that appeals to you.
You know how hard I am working to figure this out? No, but as you mentioned, I'm learning experience designer. For the past decade, I've been in learning and development, and now I am coupling that with high performance coaching, which really is all about how do you achieve or outperform the standard norms over time without sacrificing well-being or personal relationships. So I've always been
It's a tall order.
I know. I'm scared.
what? I've always been very ambitious, but not always in the right ways, you know, in like healthy ways. And so I want to help other people reach their purpose, like follow their ambition and achieve their dreams while still living a fully joyful and vibrant life. And so that's where I'm at right now in terms of coaching, and also helping organizations with a really keen lens on creating belonging filled cultures and like places where and spaces where people feel safe to bring their whole selves. And that's where the coupling, I guess, marrying of wanting people to really achieve their highest potential and also creating environments in which they can do that is where these two worlds intersect. And that's what I'm trying to achieve right now.
I love it. I love that you're building this coaching practice, you know, just and gearing it so specifically toward those types of goals, right? I mean, that's what good coaching is. So that's awesome. And Ginger, how about you? Tell us about you.
Yeah, so I'm an apartment developer. I am, I used to be a Navy wife. My husband's retired now from the Navy. So I guess I'm a Navy contractor wife, and I'm the mom of 2 boys. I started pretty young. So my oldest is 25 now, and my youngest is 16. And I've been in the apartment business forever. It was, you know, one of my very first real jobs was to be a secretary for a housing developer. And so it's kind of what I've done my whole life. And then on the side, I'm just like an activist for everything that I find important in life. You know, justice, equity.
Find Ginger on Facebook, and great discussions will follow for sure. So why did you guys want to talk about this today? I mean, I will be honest, when I put this out to kind of my network, I mean, this is something we see all the time, you know, with clients, people we work with, and in peer coaching groups, but you know, it's not something that people are real willing to be like, yes, I feel like an imposter, because it feels like, you know, you could be punished for that professionally. So yeah. Let's talk about that. Why did you decide to step into the Zoom stage with me today?
Okay, so do you want me to go first this time, Sarah?
Sure, you go right.
Okay, all right. So I will never forget the very first time I had a very specific, clear, real feeling of being an imposter.
Tell us.
Exactly the location. I could tell you exactly what I was doing. So I had started my company. I was maybe about a year-ish into it, maybe. And I had rented a little suite in an executive building, and it was about 160 square feet. And I worked in it by myself. When I started my company, it was just me. And then I hired this gentleman to help me with my books. And so the two of us were in this 160 square foot space. Yeah. And then I grew my company a little bit more, and I needed to add another employee, and we couldn't fit 3 of us in that space. And so in the little executive suite area, there were these 2 really big suites, and they were like coveted by all of the little businesses that were in there, right? Because this one was 444 square feet. It was like palatial, yes, palatial, compared to the little cubbies that we were in. And so it was kind of a big deal, you know, among all the other executive suite people, like, oh my God, you're taking the big one. Oh, you know, you're going. We're like, whoa, we're going there. And I remember we were moving our, you know, my furniture into that one, and I was walking back down the hall, and I kid you not, like I can relive this moment. It like gives me like PTSD. And it was like, what do you think you're doing? What do you think? Like, who do you think you are? what do you, like, who do you think you are moving into this big office?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could cry right now just thinking about it.
Huh? And my granny used to say, too big for your britches, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah. And it was like, and that has been something I've actually, it's like, it's never stopped me completely from doing the work that I'm doing, but it's like this, it's this thing that just, it just lives with me all of the time.
It chases you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to note. Like, I think that, I don't want anybody who's here to think that like you're going to leave today's session being like, I am slaying that dragon. It is like
right.
never going to follow me around. Like it's just something you have to kind of learn to tame and deal with, right? But it rises up, like especially in moments of great stress, of great change, anxiety. Like that's where I find it sort of rising up to meet me, and I'm like, well, down, boy, stop. What about you, Sarah? What made you say yes?
Well, I was thinking back to when you initially asked our smaller group if anyone would want to talk about, and before you could even finish your sentence, as soon as you said imposter syndrome, my hand's like, while I may not feel like an expert in a lot of things, I sure do feel like an expert in feeling like a fraud.
Right. And which is such a brave thing to say, by the way. Thank you for saying it, because I mean, if you're here and you're like, hell yes to that, please let us know. Like, chat us, let us know. Like, I think we gotta like give voice to this thing for to be able to move past it. So keep going. Sorry.
And when we were doing our prep call and just coming off of Ginger's first time feeling like an imposter, I think mine dates back to all the way to elementary school. And I have recordings. My grandpa and I would always record these like fun shows, and I was just such a gregarious, loud, personable kid until I got to elementary school. And it probably was, early years, not kindergarten, but they beat it out of you after a couple of years, and you just, for me, it resulted in silence. Feeling like, oh, all these other kids have better things to say,
right,
better answers to the questions, and every parent-teacher conference feedback would be, Sarah's so great, she's so smart, but we never ever hear her. Yeah, she never ever participates, and it was not because I didn't want to, because I did so badly, but I just didn't feel like my voice was up to par with the other loud voices in the room. And it has taken decades to not entirely get rid of that, but certainly face it head on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally identify with that. I know it's funny, like my first job, I was a reporter, and I actually didn't have a lot of imposter syndrome, because being a good journalist is going out and just asking people questions. So you're not necessarily the one, in the hot seat, like having to, perform. The performance is the writing, and you can like haggle over the writing, and then you get editors that make it better. And that was a safe place for me. But for me, it was like going to law school and then being a lawyer. Even though I performed well on the tests and I passed the bar and all of that stuff, I always felt like people were going to be like, what is she doing here? Like, get her out of here. She has no idea what she's doing. I think for me, part of that came from, I think our backgrounds, how we're raised, is very instructive. I mean, my mom always told me I could do whatever I wanted, but I didn't know any lawyers really. And I didn't know what they did, I mean, it was a perspective that I was not really familiar with. And so I could do all of the work, and I could go and like learn the law and argue in a compelling way. But then, constantly, whether it was people in my own firm, opposing counsel, mediators, judges, I was like, they're just going to think she's this young thing, because I was a lot younger then, that is, fresh off the turnip truck from Indiana, and she has no idea what she's talking about, right? And same when I made the transition into doing PR, even though I knew how to do it, it was just the sense of like, are people going to take me seriously? Will I be able to do this on my own? And so one of our attendees said it's that inner critic chatter in your head. And I think that that's really, really the best way of summing that up. We also had a chat. One of our attendees said that her imposter feeling kicked in when she went from a company that kept her in a glass box, not just a ceiling, to one that was wide open and trusted her skills and potential. So I would love to kind of get both of your sense on that. Like, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's very true. Like, if you've been kept in a very specific role and you know the parameters and you know that there's no way that you're going to get any higher than that, it's like, okay, I'm going to keep my head down, do a great job. But if the doors are thrown wide open, then you're like, oh shit, what if I mess this up and blow this, right? So what would you have to say to that, you guys?
Well, I felt it. I mean, like when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, like I get that. I don't want to speak ahead of you, Sarah. But like that's how I felt the first part of my career, when I worked for someone and I had a really specific job and I had a boss and, you know, kind of had, you know, my place, even though I was able to grow within that company, there was always, you know, there was safety in that. And then when you get rid of that safety, and also I would say the other thing to kind of piggyback, dovetail, whatever the word, Holly, is when you said like you didn't know any, you know, like you didn't know any attorneys. And so, and my mom was, you know, really the same, like always, you know, praised me for being very gifted and being smart and all of that. But, you know, I didn't know any executives.
Sure.
You know, there wasn't anybody like that. But well, let me take that back. I didn't know any outside of work. I didn't know any, I still don't know anybody that's like me in my industry.
Yeah, you're in a pretty homogenous industry.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's very, you know, being like conforming is what is rewarded. And so being a person who like can't conform to save their lives is really, you know, it's tough. It's tough to convince myself, because honest to God, I swear I'm the only one I'm having to convince that I'm any good at this.
Right. And as a side note, I will say that, like, I mean, knowing you and seeing you in action, I would never have thought like Ginger Hitzke suffers from imposter syndrome, because to me, like, you embody just confident leadership. But I think that's also something for all of us to keep in mind. Like, it's like social media. You see the best of everybody, like, on social media. Like, nobody's putting all their crap out there on social media, right? And so I think that, you know, for you to come up and say, like, yes, I feel this way, is hugely helpful for all of us.
Yeah. So. Well, because I mean, I am confident and I am those things. Like they exist. They just happen to coexist with this other part of me that's also like, but are you sure?
Yeah.
Really? So yeah, Sarah.
Yes. I have had to learn to grow very comfortable holding two truths at the same time, as a perfect example of like holding these two truths. They are both true and they are paradoxical. They don't match up. The internal doesn't match up with the externalism. And sometimes it does more and sometimes it does less, but how do you, when it does feel less aligned and you're feeling those nagging, awful voices in your head, what do you do in those times to like reset you to who you actually are, to sink into that? And I, like, for me, it took all the way up until I was working at Elm, which is where I'm at now, and working with a lot of Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies that I look to as the pinnacle of intelligence and having their shit together as an organization. And then you get in there and they're like, oh my gosh, how do you even know all this? And I had no idea I knew anything.
Right.
In these spaces.
Who are you talking to?
I remember one specific instance when I was facilitating a learning consulting session at Facebook, and there was a table full of like 12 Facebook high-level leaders, and they're conversating around who's going to bring this messaging, or are they going to have Cheryl send out a message? And I'm like, Sheryl Sandberg? is this who we're talking about right now?
Like, hold up.
And you're gonna bring my ideas to her? Like, that's the unfortunately, and I don't want anyone else to need that type of validation, but I need you to hear it from me. Nobody knows what the F they're doing, and they're all just figuring it out one day at a time, because at every single level you're going to have challenges you never ever faced, and you just have to keep going back to what you know to be true. I've done it every time. I will continue to do it.
That is great advice, like 100%. I mean, I think that I sometimes will tell myself, because I feel this, by the way, I'll share a story that happened literally this morning. So some of you who are here know my business partner, Anne-Marie Hoftailing, and Anne-Marie is just like so good at motivating. And I've been like sitting on this piece that I'm like writing and pitching to Harvard Business Review. Okay. And it's about executive presence, which is something that we're going to be training on at the end of July. I'll tell you guys more about that later. But it's something that people just really aren't talking about. And frankly, imposter syndrome can tie a lot into executive presence. So I had this piece and I couldn't even send it to her. She's my business partner. Like, we talk about everything. I wasn't sending it to her for her to read because I was afraid she was going to tell me it was shit, you know? And I couldn't and what I realized is that there was this nagging self-talk that I was doing in my head, which was like, who are you? A girl from Southern Indiana, you know, who didn't go to an Ivy League school, who is not a management consultant. What do you know about executive presence that people who read Harvard Business Review are going to care about, right? Because she had said to me, she read it, and then she was like, we need to figure out, you're acting crazy. We need to figure out what is behind that. And I said to her, it's about imposter syndrome. That is exactly what it is, right? I would have no problem writing that same piece and pitching it on behalf of a client, but to have my name attached to it and the potential for rejection was like, I can't, it's totally crippling. So I think like one of the things I told myself before I got on this call is, you know, how high could you rise if you did not have that little internal voice telling you, no, you can't, no, you shouldn't, right? I mean, what would be the limit to your potential? And I think like when I frame it that way, it's like the worst that can happen is that HBR is like, this is a crap piece, goodbye, or here, edit it, right? Like that's the worst that could happen. But if I'm not pushing myself, taking those risks, then it for sure is not going to happen. I have, yes, one of our attendees said, what if the universe is working with you versus against you? And that's totally like a great way to frame it. So one of our attendees said that she had major imposter syndrome when she started in her career in her 20s and always assumed she'd grow out of it, which I think is very interesting. Mm-hmm. But here I am, well-established and now in my mid-40s, and I still feel it every day. I cringe when I am introduced as an expert in my field. We're all nodding because we're like, feel it. Even though I objectively know that I am. Can you speak to that tricky balance between owning your knowledge and skills and expertise and the humility we need to ensure we'll keep learning and growing? What do y'all think?
I think the fact that you're even thinking about that balance is great. And I also have a problem with the word expert because it assumes that there's not any more to learn or grow in that area. Like you're the pinnacle, and I hope I'm never an expert with that definition because I always want to be building and growing my skill set. And but there's also the fact that you deserve to own what you've done, own that you are much more knowledgeable in this space than a lot of people, even though there are always going to be people that know a lot more than you, and there's always going to be people that know a lot less. So you're never going to win if you're thinking in that way, and you already are winning with the skills that you've built over time. You don't know what you know, I think, until it's tested and questioned. It's reminding yourself that you are worthy and you have a voice.
I keep rereading it. So that tricky balance between owning your knowledge, skills, expertise, and the humility we need to ensure. I mean, that's true. I wouldn't want to throw that out, right? Because there is value in a certain amount of humility and being humble. So I certainly think that's part of, I think that's part of this sort of this pot here that we're dealing with of emotions. It's funny, like when I know I'm really good at something, or God forbid, I'm like being insulted by like not being valued enough, I am like, you're barely even good enough to work with me. I mean, I don't actually say that to people, but it's just like how it's the expression of how I feel. Like, I am so good. I'm going to take such good care of you. It's going to be such a joy for you to be able to work with me. So I do feel that. And I know that, that I'm very, very good at a lot of things. I will say though, that the older I've gotten, the more I'm able to explain and convey to people, look, here's where I'm 100% comfortable. And all day long, I know there's literally no one better that you can talk to about this, because I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know exactly kind of where to lead you if there's anything that's like slightly out of there. And I'm going to take care of you, because it's just what I do. I just like, I'm always good to be with. And then, here's some areas, because I'm in real estate, so everybody thinks I know everything about real estate at all, everywhere. They think I know how to find a plumber for your house, all the way through how to build a skyscraper. Right. Okay, I don't. I know a really specific way to build an apartment complex, and there's multiple different ways to do that. But I'm now at the point where I can say that. I'm a hyper expert in this one thing, and I feel really, really good about it. And I go out here and I look at this, or I can talk to you, or I can put you in a different direction, or maybe I can, connect you with someone who is more of an expert in that way, that where they're going to be happier and you're going to be happier with them. I'm always here, as the comeback, as the backup. But sometimes you maybe need to go to somebody else who that's more of their jam. And I don't feel bad about that. I don't actually feel like an imposter in any way when I say that.
Ginger, do you feel like when you started out, like, did you feel like you needed to be an expert in all things to all people and have all the answers? This goes for both of you, actually. Like, is that something that maybe has fed your imposter syndrome a bit? Again, speaking of personal experience, I definitely have been victim of that,
Yeah, it's funny. I feel it more now that I'm older, because I'm older. Mm-hmm. So I feel like all the gray hair, I feel like tells you I know this thing better than I do. And I'm wiser, and I think I am more I'm more humble, like genuinely. I have more,
more life experience, right?
Yeah, I've been, thrown on my ass enough times now to have some experience. And so, I think when I was younger, I started my company was like 32 or 33. Mm-hmm. So I was already like a girl. I already decided not to own a nonprofit housing development company, because most women that are the heads of development companies are doing nonprofit work.
Which is really interesting.
Oh yeah, it drives me nuts. And I'm happy to get on my soapbox at the end of this thing again about that. So anytime I can talk about making money.
We're here for it.
You're keeping your money, generating your wealth. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like when I was younger and I started, I think I got a lot of I think I was given more room for some reason. I think I don't know. I know I feel it more now, because I feel like there's more expected of me, that I should be wiser and better at this now. And so I definitely I get a little scared more often than I did when I was younger. I would just go off and try to do anything then. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we had one of our attendees said that age brings so much wisdom. We learned to lean into it. At 61, I still question whether I'm smart enough of an expert. When will I be found out? And I know this particular person personally, and
when will I be found out? Girl?
She struggles with it, but I think that just illustrates, because I think when I started out, particularly as a lawyer, I was in my 20s, and as a female attorney, I don't know if there's any attorneys here that they're joining us that want to speak to this, but definitely you walk into a deposition, it's like, oh, are you the court reporter? It's like they train these old white dudes, your opposing counsel, to say that to throw you off your game. It's like everybody has a story of being mistaken for the court reporter, or being mistaken for an assistant or whatever. And that just feeds that beast of being like, I'm young, I'm inexperienced, what do I know? You know, but to go back to the question about humility, one of the things I used to get really pissed about that when I was first starting out as a lawyer. And then I realized, like, truly, my first couple of years, my support staff knew way more about actually practicing law than I did. So I was like, okay, how can I avail myself of all of these fantastic resources that I'm working with who know their way around, right? And I say that because I think one of the things I would like everybody here to kind of take away is that you're not an island, you're not having a unique experience. Like, everybody deals with this. It's of course unique to your own personal circumstance, but in terms of this idea that there's someone saying that you've never done this before, you have less experience than this, you know, than so and so and so and so, like that is something that I think probably everyone here, if we took a poll, would say yes, I have felt. I personally have found tremendous value in talking about it, and talking about it with women who are similarly situated professionally. Like, they're out there, they're trying to build a business, they're in an industry, you know, that's, you know, XYZ dominated, male dominated, whatever it might be, right? I'm a part of a peer advisory group. Both of these women are part of peer advisory groups. I think that has been huge for me to see, like, to do exactly what we're doing today. Like, other people feel this, and maybe you get there by hiring a coach to help you process that. Maybe you join some kind of professional group. Maybe you do it really informally with, if you're a general counsel of a company, you talk to other GCs, female GCs about it. But I think that is something that you can do, like, right now, to start unpacking all of what we're talking about, because we could probably talk about this for 4 hours and still not get through it. One of our attendees had said, I'm curious if imposter syndrome is something that men feel as much as women do. And I mean, I have no data for this, but I think the answer would be no. I don't think men probably deal with this as much as women do. And the reasons for that, I think, are myriad. But I'm curious to hear from our panelists as to just, you know, how gender plays a role in this.
Yeah.
I know that it does, and I also don't have the data, but I don't want to negate the fact that men definitely feel it too. Our society is created to well, it's changing, which is really awesome, I think, as far as elevating voices that actually, voices of substance, not just of lies and made up things. But I will say that as women, I feel like we don't, in the past, we haven't talked about it as much with one another. Like, men will have their good old boys clubs. And we've never had this many women, I think, in positions of power and leadership. And now it's time for us to build our tribes, to get our women together and say, and I like how you put, Holly, like, seeking out people that are kind of working towards what you're working towards, or have similar goals or similar levels of ambition, because then you're living these very different but parallel experiences that you can learn from each other. Okay, this isn't exactly a mirrored situation, but how did you tackle this? And I found immense benefits in building out my own circle of influencers to tell me when I'm being outright wrong about my skills and abilities. So yeah, it's really great for me.
What about you, Ginger?
Yeah. You know, my data points are just my lived experience, right? So, and I do have, you know, I have quite a few male friends who are in the real estate development business, and so I would say I do think that it exists. I don't, among men. Men certainly have feelings, and
Yeah.
I can feel the same things that we do. I just, you know, like you both were saying, like, women being in leadership positions, women, you know, taking charge, being, you know, CEOs, entrepreneurs. It's newer, right? So we're definitely, like, in you know, new waters, and so it's definitely going to feel scary. And I don't think that men as a whole, you know, there's obviously, lots of different stories that are going to be in there. I don't want to seem not sensitive to that or not seeing that. But I will say, I'm in, you call it a peer network group. I don't know what to call what we are, but you're right. Someone had called it an executive group. I was like, great. It's like a women CEO club kind of. And so I'm in that, and I've been in another one before that was predominantly male. It was co-ed, but it was like, everybody was really proud of themselves when they got women to the table. It was like, woo, we got ladies here.
Ginger, welcome.
Right.
Ladies.
And so like, never would I bring up imposter syndrome around that table.
Right.
But I think that like if maybe if we were all like super hammered,
right,
and then like
you could like say it and then everybody forgets.
Right, then maybe you started to bring it up. Then I think you might find that men would have like different stories, but I still think they would be like slightly different than the ones that women would have. So I think it's certainly there. I just I think that we're just more willing to like talk about it because we're like talking about things as our way of problem solving, right? Like sharing and getting it out there.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up, because it has been a personal experience of mine as I've like dealt with imposter syndrome, and I wonder if either of you, if this resonates with you or resonates with anyone who's here. I, for my whole life, have had this tendency to sort of catastrophize mistakes that I make. Like mistakes that are, or problems that are like very inconsequential in the large scheme. And for a long time I was like, no, that's just because you're a perfectionist. You're just a perfectionist. You're just really type A. Like there's all these like cutesy names and like adjectives we can throw at that. But what I realized was like, it kind of ties into the question we just got, which is like, what do you do when your inner critic or an a-hole you were dealing with? She says, something points out, you've done something before or whatever. I think like, I felt the need to never make a mistake and to always have all the answers, right? Going back to what you were saying, because I felt like if I said, I don't know, or you know what, I totally messed this up, but I fixed it, or here's my plan to fix it, I felt like that would undermine my credibility, right? Like that. And what I've realized is that like I've lost so much time catastrophizing mistakes, right? That I could have been putting to use actually fixing the problem or doing something productive. So I wonder if that speaks to either of you or speaks to anyone who's here.
Me for sure. The cutesy name that my therapist calls it is unrelenting standards, which I have. But I always feel better because she also has unrelenting standards and assures me that you can overcome.
Right, good.
But honestly, in working with her to start to recognize my patterns of when that shows up and what to do when it does has been game changing for me, because it really is like, when am I expecting perfectionism when it's just not necessary?
Yeah.
Almost all of the time.
All the time, yeah.
So how can I be kinder and just really check the facts on what the consequences would be if I mess this up, or if I asked for help, or I said, I'm just not sure, can you review this? And it's been very freeing. It still is there, this little thing on my shoulder, these nagging standards, but I have a way to address them head on and really investigate, like, am I making this a much bigger deal than it needs to be? Yes, let's quickly get past that.
Yeah. And I think, Ginger, I want to get to you on this, but a question came in, like, what do you do when it comes up? I mean, one of the best tactics Anne Marie actually has armed me with is asking myself these questions, like, is this thing that I believe to be true? Is it true? Is it really true? Right? Is it really, really true? Because I think, like, someone just said, she struggles with the same thing 11 years as a lawyer and still struggles with the fear that any mistake I will make will get me fired or not promoted. And it's like, well, ask yourself, is that true? Like, is that is it grounded in any kind of fact, or is this just entirely something subjective you were, projecting onto an otherwise sort of, benign set of circumstances? But Ginger, curious of what you think about all of that, and just any strategies you would have to like get over that.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the question. Can everybody see the questions in the Q&A too, in addition to?
Some of them are just to all panelists, and some of them are to panelists and attendees.
Okay, because I just think this is such a good, I think it's just so good to talk about. So this question says, what do you do when your inner critic, or parentheses, an a-hole you were dealing with, I'm assuming this is like a third party person, correctly points out that you have not done something before, have less experience than the others, etc. So I will take those in two parts. If it's an asshole, I would say fuck them, because they don't have your interest at heart, and they're probably pushing things on you that they believe about themselves. That is like, honest to God, if it's a third party, I have no problem dealing with that. I am mean enough to myself. I do not need anybody else coming to me. I am very good at being like, no, go. You don't belong here. I like to fight with myself. Thank you very much.
Formidable critics. Yeah.
I do this. I'm doing this right now, and I've been like going around and around and around with myself on this new project concept that neither of you guys are in my group, so you don't know.
Yeah.
But I've been talking about, trying to do something, slightly different than what I have been doing with building new apartment complexes, and feeling like having this dual feeling of like, God, I know I would be really good for this. And then another part is I'm entering an area that I'm doing something no one has, like, I think, accomplished yet that I know of. So I go back and forth, and I will say the thing that has been helping me is that I have a group like Infinite. I also have a separate teacher that I work with, and I'll put that, in, I don't even know if we're supposed to be talking about Infinite, by the way, I'm sorry, but
group, yeah.
but I have another teacher that I work with that is helping me, because a lot of these things are much deeper. There's a lot of stuff going on, and Sarah, you mentioned a therapist. It's along those lines that I think that there's a lot of this negative self-talk that we do, that we need to be addressing separately through some form of a therapy.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking, part of the work I've done just in confronting this myself, trying to figure out like sort of what it stems from. I remember, this is never lost on me. Like when I'm in New York for client work, or I'm in San Francisco back in the old days
when you could go places.
Yeah.
Oh.
I remember, like one of the first times I went to New York and was training this big client, this big shiny person, and I'm like walking up to this office building, and I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck are you doing here? Like they're going to look at you and know that you don't know what you're talking about. Because growing up, I mean, I would see these tall office buildings. That was like not where anybody that I knew worked. Okay. Nobody. They were super fancy. And I look at my own kids now, and like how it's so normal for them to go into my husband's like high-rise office building. Oh, this is daddy's office, and mommy works here, and like this and that. It's just a totally different, set of circumstances. Right. And I realized like that lack of proximity, even though I was exposed to so many fabulous opportunities growing up, it's like, if that's not what that can embed itself in your brain, and it's very difficult to watch, and so recognizing that, I think, is a good first step, and to being able to quiet those voices. And one of our attendees said, know your triggers, feel them, and find your inner champion to draw the inner critic out. And, what could the inner critic be telling us, and where is the gift there? And that's a tall order, but I totally agree with it. I mean, but I also think it's something that like is not going to be accomplished in, 30 minutes sitting down and journaling. Like to your point, Ginger, you should be working with a coach. You should be part of a professional group, formal or informal. I would highly actually recommend, frankly, if you're going to do some kind of professional group, don't do it like within your organization, because like I believe that the value of more of like a peer guidance and peer advisory model is having people from a variety of life experiences, like just like the three of us here on this call. Like we're very different, we have a lot of different experiences, but I think then those people are able to they're able to kind of drop into your situation from a very nuanced and yet detached perspective. They're not too close. They don't, they don't give a shit about the office politics. They don't care, right? I mean, it's more just like, we see you as a human. Here's what you were excellent at. Here's where you can improve things. Here's right. And you're getting a fuller picture of who you actually are as a professional. I actually also, we didn't talk about this in the call, sorry guys, but I want to bring this up because I have found it, I find it interesting. So for me, motherhood has kind of been an interesting complication with imposter. Because, you know, I think the reality is now more than ever, this could be a whole separate topic, but like women, working women bear the preponderance of the child rearing, the planning, the this and the that. And that is, unless you, well, that could be a separate topic. But anyway, that is just a reality. And the pandemic is exacerbating that. And I think, you know, for me, I have a very supportive partner. He's working at home, like we're divvying it up, we're doing our thing, but like my identity feels very fragmented a lot of the time, right? And so it's like, you never feel like you're doing anything well, at least I don't. And that really, I think, can be feeding that beast of feeling like an imposter, feeling like a fraud. Well, you know, I was unfortunately virtually schooling my kids for 4 hours, so I'm not as prepared as I could have been because blah, 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 right? And then you start to spiral. So does that speak to either of you? Does it speak to anyone here? It speaks to God.
Definitely.
Someone just said, yes, in the chat box.
Gosh, these kids just throw us for a loop every single day. I go through, okay, I got this. They're doing well. They're, you know, they're little confident. I have 2 daughters. I don't think I said that yet. They're 6 and 9. And so I feel like you always feel this pressure to be a good role model and to make them into good contributing members of society. But how can you do that when they change? Every stage is like you're parenting sometimes feels like a brand new child.
Yeah.
Like my 9-year-old who is so emotional. She has the biggest heart and she's the most sensitive, and I just feel like she's suffering from we won't name it depression, but she's just been going through a really tough time. Yeah. But every time I think I've got it, I don't have it anymore. So I've come to terms with saying some days like, today was a good mom day, or today was a good mom hour. It's just like patting myself on the back for that hour that I had of good motherhood. And it's not gonna be perfect all the time.
That's a win. Yes.
Yeah.
We got to take the wins where we can.
Celebrating those small moments of confident motherhood, because they're few and far between.
What about you, Ginger?
Well, before I say my thing about that, I would like to say I think any of us would be like thrilled if like any other one of us had to mother our children. Like, I mean, okay, we would be quite okay with it, right? So let's acknowledge that. I think anybody in this in the chat,
high five.
Like, I think we'd all be good, right? I mean, come on, we're overachiever, perfectionists, caregivers. I think they just might walk away a little codependent. I don't know. Anyways, no, I'm kidding. So, no, so I think I should just acknowledge and give us props that like we're amazing mothers. You know, my kids are older right now, so I'm really lucky that the culture right now, like the culture you guys are living in with young kids. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't deal with that pressure. I didn't deal with that. Yeah. I raised my kid in like before the 2000s with my old one. You know, shit's real different. This like standard of motherhood and perfection is like, it's so stressful. I see it out there. Yeah. Every time I see a picture of a mother and her children in a field somewhere, in a beautiful, I just want to like, sorry guys. Oh my God, huh? No. No. I just feel like, oh my God, like I feel pressure for her. That's how I feel. Yeah. Because of this social media. Too much. I missed all of this. You know, I spanked my kid, you know, when I probably shouldn't have, you know, all the things that you're not supposed to do. So, yeah, hats off to you guys having to live this life. It's terrible. But back to the thing with work and feeling like two different people. I even still feel that way. I feel like, you know, I have my 16-year-old at home and I'm like, ooh, I'm going to live my new life. you know, when my kid goes to college, because I won't have anybody at home. Or I have called, and I really have got to stop saying this, but it's really how I feel. When I go to work for like a long time, or if I leave a lot to go, I call it abandoning my family. I'm going to abandon, I've got to get a lot done. I'm going to abandon my family.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
Like it's one or the other, right?
Right? Because if I'm not the homemaker in addition to a CEO, I am not a good mother. I am a terrible mother. So no, I certainly feel that. And I would say, ladies, be nicer to yourselves. Those of you with little kids right now, whoo.
We're not taking pictures in fields, that's for sure. But I think, you know, it's like unpacking kind of all of these. We're not just one thing, you know, and that's something else that we talk about a lot, like when in coaching and in our peer groups. You know, I think that like there's this idea that to be successful as a lawyer or as a, you know, as a developer, as a learning design professional in PR, like that you have to look a certain way, be a certain way, do things a certain way. And this again ties into this whole idea of executive presence, which we're doing this training on July 22nd. But you know, it's leadership can look like a lot of different things. And I think holding ourselves to this impossible standard. I mean, ask yourself, I want to end by asking you guys what strategies you would give to people here. But, you know, to me, it's like, identify the standard. Like, what is the standard that you're holding yourself to? And if that standard is absolute perfection, guess what? We're all humans and we all mess up all the time, right? And so what is your strategy to recover from that? And are you catastrophizing mistakes? I mean, this is just like what I follow. Someone just said, I read something helpful that the goal should not be work-life balance because balance is impossible. Focus on being centered instead. And I think that's that applies to this whole idea of imposter syndrome generally, in addition to work-life balance, right? Like, how are you centering yourself? What strategies would you guys leave our folks here and those who are going to watch later with in terms of what are some takeaways?
Want me to go first?
Sure.
I will share a couple of questions and end with a mantra that I love.
Ooh.
All right, I got my pen. Everybody get their pens.
And this is recorded, so that's a
Yes.
So one of them is, I'm trying to create big things. I've got big dreams, but I've got big ambitions. So one thing I like to ask myself is, will this belief carry me to my desired life? And if it won't, let's think about some strategies to do that, to negate that or make that go away. But is this verifiable and real? Holly's check the facts. Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? And I think that we are very literal in thinking about, well, I haven't done this exact specific thing. Well, what are all the other ways that you've built up your skills that can set you apart when it comes to success?
Totally.
And so I've had to do a lot of that. So it's like, you don't need another credential. You don't need another degree. You are ready just as you are. And then what would make me a role model now? I want to be a role model for my daughters. I want to pave the way for a lot of other women to not have to feel this way, to not have to go through what we're going through or what generations and generations of us before had. I want to be a good ancestor, as Layla Saad says. Mm-hmm. So how can working on this demon in me help model for others? And then finally, what's the next right thing? This is Glennon Doyle, one of my absolute faves. What's the next right thing I can do here? It doesn't have to be big. It can just be chipping away. But I don't have to think about all the way at the end of the finish line because that's really scary and I don't know how I'm going to get there. What's one next step I can take that's moving the needle forward? And then, and on the mantra, which I love from AOC, from Knock Down the House, she says, I'm experienced enough to do this. I am knowledgeable enough to do this. I'm prepared enough to do this. I'm mature enough to do this, and I am brave enough to do this. And I would end with, my voice has value. So repeating that to yourself. Every time you go into a situation, scary situation, like say it till you believe it. And then go do that.
Thank you, Sarah. Gorgeous. Ginger?
I will just put an exclamation mark on that. What the hell else is there to say? What am I having to offer here? That was
dropping the mic.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, that's drop mic. I will do that for you here. Boop.
Yes. How can everyone find you? Like, where do you live on the internet? Where can they find you?
Facebook. I only have 1,600 friends, so I have a lot of room. And
everybody, I love it.
If they are friends with you, I will accept them. I swear a lot. I say filthy, filthy things to trolls. So as long as you don't troll me, I will be nice to you, but I swear a lot.
You heard it here first. Find her on Facebook. Also, your company is called Hitzke.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll drop that in. I'll drop in my link to my company, and I will drop in my link to my teacher as well, in case you guys are interested in looking her up. She specializes in dealing with very, very powerful women. So,
I am sending that to everybody that's here.
Yeah.
And Sarah.
I love Ginger's idea to drop some things in the chat. So follow me on Instagram. That's where I spend a lot of my time. And then LinkedIn, I have my personal page, and then I have my business page, Sarah Bacerra Consulting. I'm posting on both. The business page is new and felt a little imposter when I created a business page.
You're like, why should I be creating this business page?
Who am I?
You have to.
Let's connect. I'd love to. I'll talk about this all day, or I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I want real, deep conversations of authenticity. So thank you for hosting us.
Yes. Oh, it was my privilege to hang out with the two of you and with all of you who are here. So we do these every Friday. I will be totally honest. I have not decided what we're going to talk about next week. So if you have an idea, like, I'm all ears, you can email me at holly@storyimprinting.com. And if you follow us on LinkedIn, I post it typically every week. And you'll see the link to register. Please share this with people that you think would benefit from it. We, as I mentioned, are doing a training on executive presence. It's $25. It's through Zoom. It's with my partner, Anne Marie, who both of these women know. And Anne Marie is so fabulous and probably the best public speaker I have legitimately ever seen. Like, she wows me every time. And we are super excited to deliver that training, because I think it's really important. I am going to pitch my HBR piece, so I'm telling all of you here, I'll actually do it, because if I don't do it now, like, you all can shame me about it. But we appreciate all of you taking the time. Please reach out if you have any feedback, if there are things you want to hear us talk about. Find us on social media, holly@storyimprinting.com. Ladies, you're gorgeous and authentic and vulnerable and fabulous. And I see no reason for you ever to be an imposter in your own brain. So stop it. And
hey, can I say one last thing?
Yes.
Shout out to Kathy Gallagher, man. She has been lighting up this chat with such good stuff. Like, yeah, so like, props to you for being the fourth one in this convo that wasn't here on camera. You're awesome.
Kathy, we need to get on a Zoom chat together. So
yeah.
I'm just going to embarrass Kathy before you guys drop off. So Kathy is she worked for a former client of mine, and we worked like hand in glove together. And she was one of the best, she's one of my favorite human beings. And she's such a hard worker. She keeps every train running on time. She's super incredible. And she is a coach as well now in Minneapolis. And is super involved with Dress for Success there, and with some other organizations. And Kathy, you'll have to text me if you're still, or send it to me if you're still on. But Kathy is phenomenal, and it's Kathi, Gallagher, common spelling. I also went to her wedding 2 years ago. She married her. She married her camp boyfriend, Kathy. I'm gonna totally screw this up, Ben. Like, they reconnected later in life, but they went to German camp together growing up. And it's just the most touching, fabulous wedding that I probably have ever been to. Like, best time in Minneapolis at summer German camp, she said. Kathy is great, and yes, thank you, Kathy, for all of your great feedback, because it's really helped the conversation.
Oh yeah, it did, big time. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, go out there and love on someone. Have a great, but don't get too close. Social distance. Only love on the people that are in your pod. Wear your mask. Don't be a jerk. And have a great weekend. I'll see you guys.
Watch Hamilton tonight. Watch Hamilton. Okay.
Bye, y'all.